Our guest joining us here on the broadcast right now. Good afternoon, Danny Orbach, who's a military historian, a senior lecturer in Hebrew, University of Jerusalem. He's joining us here on the broadcast, and Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni as well joining us here on the broadcast. Good afternoon to both of you. Danny, I really want to understand from you the help and the support that is now being extended by multiple countries who today in the time of crisis for Israel are now standing with the country, with Israel. What does it mean? What does it signify?
Means a lot to us. It means everything to us because our greatest fear was a multi-front war. An attack from three fronts, from Hezbollah in the north, maybe in the West Bank as well, and other Iranian proxies, let's say in Iraq or Yemen. And the backing we have from the US, the two aircraft carrier naval task forces which are coming here, are giving us the necessary support to focus our forces, concentrate our forces against the Hamas ISIS terrorists in the south, while securing our back in the north.
Okay. Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, you know, this kind of support we've seen the United States extend time and again. A support such as this came in for Ukraine as well in its time of crisis, and we've seen that non-stop support being extended from the United States, and perhaps the first country this time around as well who came out to say that we're in this fight with Israel. They've already dispatched a first set of US weaponry to Israel. We saw that aircraft land yesterday. In the meanwhile, we're also, sir, learning, and we're going to be putting out details of the same in just a bit, how Germany has decided to supply 2 drones to Israel. This kind of a military support, apart from support in spirit, letter and spirit, how does it really go down, you know, the country which is battling this kind of an intense fighting?
Thank you very much. I think at the very outset, such a barbaric act must be condemned and must be supported by one and all in the world, because Israel is fighting the terrorists. If the Israelis were fighting the Palestinians, it would have been a different thing. But they don't represent the Palestinians. I'm sure the majority of the Palestinians have not voted Hamas to power in Gaza. So in any case, they're fighting the terrorists, and they ought not to be left. They must be eradicated. They must be cleaned, because there's no place for such horrific, barbaric massacre being conducted of children. That's not done. And if they have indulged in it, they ought to be, to be treated, and the whole world must stand by. You can't have a world divided on religious lines, that it's a Muslim world, the Christian world, or the Hindu world. It's nothing like that. There is obviously no Hindu world, and that is the whole thing. Now, but notwithstanding whatever it be, we must stand by something which is barbaric, something which is horrific, and we must not let these people get away with it. It is indeed a 9/11 moment for Israel. Israel must react, and react extremely hard. There is just no doubt about it. Enough is enough. For any other reason, for 75 years is going on. I thought the Israelis were probably looking for some kind of a reconciliation by wanting, to be treating Hamas with the kid gloves. They ought to have not treated them with kid gloves. And even with the deal with Saudi Arabia, which probably the Hamas may be feeling that their whole identity or the very purpose of the existence would stand defeated, where if there's peace and tranquility in the Middle East. It is in that context that it's very essential that the world must stand with Israel.
And sir, we also would want to talk about the geopolitical situation and how dynamic it is, looking at the ongoing crisis that Israel has been facing. Of course, the kind of support that has been extended by the Western nations. We also talk about Germany here. Even when it comes to the German Chancellor, who has now extended support to Israel and has now come out to say that Germany will now support Israel in its defense efforts with 2 drones. That is the information that is now coming in from Germany's side. Let's listen in.
Dieser Überfall der Hamas auf Israel ist furchtbar und er ist barbarisch. In diesen dunklen Stunden für den jüdischen Staat stehen Deutschland und Frankreich ganz fest an der Seite Israels. Dies habe ich Premier Netanyahu gestern persönlich versichert. Der Terror wird nicht gewinnen, der Hass wird nicht siegen. Die Gewalt wird nicht triumphieren. Der Überfall der Hamas auf Israel ist furchtbar und er ist barbarisch. In diesen dunklen Stunden für den jüdischen Staat stehen Deutschland und Frankreich ganz fest.
Mr. Danny, Berlin is going to be giving, Heron drones to the German Air Force, which they're, of course, going to be using in the war against the Hamas terrorists. In addition, we're also picking up reports of how there are first requests that have come in for ammunition for ships as well. This kind of assistance coming in from world powers like the United States and Germany, what does it mean for Israel, and how significant is it in terms of tackling a brutal Hamas force, because they too, remember, are very well equipped given by the magnitude of the assault they've carried out last Saturday?
What Israel needs most of all is bunker busters, bombs which can destroy bunkers, because Hamas is digging deeper in the underground terrain under Gaza. And we also need supply of interceptors for our rocket defense systems, so our air defense systems. And as far as I heard, both are coming from the United States and maybe also from other countries. And this is what the Israeli army needs in order both to protect our rear, our civilians, from Hamas and maybe Hezbollah rocket attacks, and destroy the leaders of this genocidal group of Hamas inside their bunkers, so they wouldn't be able to hide, while only Palestinian civilians suffer.
Well, absolutely, sir, because, of course, the help is now coming in, and many countries which are standing in support and solidarity with Israel. But we also talk about the butchery and the barbarity that has also been done to those innocent lives there in Israel. How paradise has now turned into hell. The savagery of the Hamas terrorists that continues in parts of Israel. And the stories that are now coming in from the war-torn nation are spine-chilling. From butchering innocents to many taking unarmed civilians hostage. And the worst that has now been confirmed, Danny and Lieutenant General Kulkarni, sir, this is coming at a time when the Israeli Defense Forces have confirmed that babies have been butchered. This is a slaughter that has now been taken place of innocent lives. We'll first listen into that confirmation that came in from the IDF sides.
And we got very, very disturbing reports of that came from the ground that there were babies that had been beheaded. And I admit it took us some time to really understand and to verify that report. And it was hard to believe that even Hamas could perform such a barbaric act. But after eyewitnesses came forward and after a senior official in the Israeli coronary service, Zaka, came forward on record on CBS News and said, yes, I saw the bodies of beheaded babies, I think we can now say with relative confidence that this is unfortunately what happened in Be'eri. This is what Hamas did to Israeli civilians.
In fact, in a strongly worded statement, as far as these beheadings and these killings are concerned, Joe Biden, the United States president, also called it an act of sheer evil. He said he never really thought he would see pictures of terrorists beheading children.
I never really thought that I would see and have confirmed pictures of terrorists beheading children. I never thought I'd ever. Anyway, but there are countries in the region that are trying to be of some help, including Arab nations that are trying to be of some help.
Kulkarni, sir, what is your understanding, especially if we talk about such barbarity that is being witnessed against civilians and especially innocents and people taking hostage? I mean, where do they gather so much hatred in their hearts to actually commit such an act, sir?
Absolutely, total hatred. You know, you can, if one or two children, it may be acceptable, but maybe by mistake. 40 children being beheaded, that's an absolute criminal act. Massacre is the word that can be used, and evil rightly used by the US president. It couldn't be worse than this. You know what happened? If you're firing, there are airstrikes on Gaza, when you have told Gaza that please vacate, there are going to be airstrikes and the civilians vacate. If there's a collateral damage, that's a different story. And more than anything, Hamas uses those as human shields. That's a different act when lots of civilians might die in that air attack. But here, what have those 40 children done to you? Beheading them, and it's extremely sad. Even women, the way they've massacred women, out of the 1,200 Israelis that have lost life, I think all of them probably in sleep or just when they were in that festive mood or in and around. I think that's something which a barbaric act, and then screaming and shouting for, those sloganeering after that, I think all of it must be condemned. There is no denying the fact that such a thing is not acceptable. And if Hamas is definitely, there's no denying the fact it's a terrorist organization, they must be wiped out. I know the ideology is very difficult to wipe out. These terrorists will be wiped out. Israel will win. Gaza will be in Israeli hand. That is all. But the very fact that they have resorted to these kind of barbaric acts is an indication that, there is some very evil thinking which needs eradication, and that eradication is done now. Now is not a question of appeasement. Now is not the time to go in for talk. Now is not to worry about the hostages. It's just to strike Gaza so that people realize that it is not acceptable, not just there,
Yes.
it's the entire world. Because this kind
It's
of
unacceptable,
ideology,
Lieutenant General Kulkarni, because this is plain sheer monstrous behavior that has been unleashed by these Hamas terrorists. Mr. Danny, how does Israel respond to the kind of terror apologists who are coming out and plainly putting out their sympathies towards the Hamas agenda, the Palestinian agenda, because one is trying to now distinguish between the Palestinian agenda and the brutality with which these Hamas terrorists have carried out these brutal executions?
I think that first of all, our Indian viewers remember well what happened in Mumbai, how the terrorists of Lashkar-e-Taiba killed women and children and massacred everybody. And I think it's the same thing here. These are people with a radical ideology of genocide. It has to be said. They want to exterminate the Jewish people, just like the terrorists from Lashkar-e-Taiba did to innocent Indians. And the apologists of this massacre, the people who try to deny, the people who spread Hamas propaganda, are terrorists themselves, and we should isolate them, we should punish them, we should treat them, the apologists, as the terrorists they are.
But Mr. Danny, does this, pledge to vow revenge, doesn't it all get complicated when we talk about a hostage situation, because there are at least 150 people with the Hamas terror groups as we speak?
It's very difficult. I don't believe in revenge. I believe in destroying Hamas, in eradicating the threat from Gaza. It's not to satisfy our feelings. It's to safeguard our security, and yes, later to punish the criminals. But it's very important to emphasize that we are not acting just because we are angry. We are acting to eradicate the genocidal threat from Gaza. And as for the hostages, I think everything has to be done to release them. I do not rule out a very limited deal of maybe giving some humanitarian help or water to Gaza in exchange for the hostages. But we should still punish Hamas and still occupy Gaza, even though we have hostages, because if we give up now, way more hostages will be kidnapped and die in the future. This is not the time to give up.
Right, sir. And rightly said by you, this is not the time to give up. Kulkarni, sir, are there, anything to learn for India? Because there have been many countries who have quickly responded and reacted, including India, and the kind of support that has also been extended by the Western nations. We talk about Israel, sir, one of the top intel agencies they have with them, especially when it comes to military outfits as well. How do we also understand this grave kind of a situation, as they were taken completely by surprise last Saturday when this attack happened?
See, absolutely. For India, India is being badly affected by terrorism, and there's no other country in the world which can actually be affected so badly as India is, because India's neighbor Pakistan uses terrorism as an instrument of state policy. And in that context, even when India has taken a stand, India has taken a stand against terrorism. We stand by Israel against terrorism, because terrorism has got no religion, and that must be understood. And if that be so, we must be careful. We must be extremely vigilant in India also, because in India, within India also, there are all kinds of voices. You can see political voices, you can see all kinds of voices based on religion, standing, whatever that be so. So this vigilance is a very essential part in India. We have to be vigilant on the border, we have to be vigilant inside our own country, so that these kind of incidents this kind of evil thinking must not be permitted whatsoever, because this is evil thinking. If somebody has difference of opinion, there are ways of negotiating those difference of opinion, not resorting to this kind of barbaric violence, because there will never be an end, because all those who are suffering really knows where the shoe bites, and they are bound to retaliate. If Israel can't get weak on its knees because of hostages, this is the time to eradicate, and eradicate they must. If they don't do it now, they are not eradicating for themselves, they are eradicating for the entire world, to be able to convey that this is not acceptable. If that be so, even in India, we should not be taken by surprise, and this is kind of a warning to all of us in India, which has got a society which is totally different. We are a secular nation, and therefore in that context we ought to be careful. A democratic secular nation has to be more than careful and very, very vigilant on should such a thing not happen. Yeah.
Okay. Lieutenant General Kulkarni, you know, the rules of engagement have been blatantly violated. That is also something that we need to focus upon, and that's why the entire world is perhaps so very angry. I mean, you have armed Hamas terrorists versus innocent babies, toddlers. How does that make sense to anyone in the world? Many thanks, gentlemen, for speaking to us while